Hi, with Julian on the brown note, trying to get through all of my outstanding albums because I've done so few shows lately, and I promised I wouldn't listen to any new music until I cleared this backlog, so some of these reviews are going to be really short. Perhaps not this one, the latest from the Chemical Brothers, the UK duo of Ed Simmons and Tom Rowlands, who I remember from the front cover of the British tabloid music paper, the New Musical Express, which had a cassette on the front, and it blew everyone's minds. The last track on it was by a group called the Dust Brothers, and it was called Leave Home, and this was at the height of probably the most interesting period in UK music since the 60s, late 60s, with shoegaze and Manchester and emerging Britpop and the orbital / underworld leftism, techno house era exploding, and the hardcore era like the Prodigy and trip hop from Massive Attack, and it was just everywhere. It was amazing new scenes coming on, and they were heralding in Big Beat, which isn't one that has aged particularly well, but they've kind of like Fatboy Slim as a legacy act. And a lot of that music is, you don't really hear Take California that much these days. I did feature Propellerhead's Sticks and Drums and Rock and Roll not that long ago on my radio show, which is a really good album. But it did weather badly. But the Chemical Brothers evolved quite well. And their latest album, which is their 10th studio album, is, I feel, their strongest since my favourite, which I think is around 98, 99, Surrender. And I think it's not got quite enough credit. I'm not going to go through every single track, but most of them. Live Again, featuring Halo Mort, is one of my probably top 5 tracks of the year. It is fantastic. Immediately they sort of get into this Love Remains era of like quartet, which adds a massive component to the record. It's really wonky, even harks back to sort of like the 2007 Blog House era, even a bit of filter disco. Really good female vocal mood on it, and I think it's a terrific track. It's one of the best ones I've heard from them for ages, and they maintain that pattern, which isn't very, like, the album's called For That Beautiful Feeling, but the opening run of tracks, which is probably the strongest on the album, is actually quite dark. So No Reason, the second one, No Reason to Live, Kill Us All. It's not exactly euphoric stuff. Does remind me a little bit of We Are Your Friends, it's sort of era Justice music, and I guess they were probably heavily influenced by the Chemical Brothers in the first place. And the last of that very strong opening run, Goodbye, has probably the most emotive sample yet, and some very sort of orbital Snivelization era strobing synths in the background, which I loved. And the main synthesizer got this sort of, again, sort of like 2007 era, really loud, acidy synth. A lot of percussion here. I think with both breakbeat and big beat, the percussion being very large and quite bombastic and simplistic didn't make the music age very well, whereas here the percussion is often quite clipped and subtle for fairly bombastic music, sort of in the same realm as, garage or two-step or something like that. And again, it's got this urgency and dynamism to it. None of these tracks build at all. They pretty much start fully fledged, and they go into their breakdown after 1 minute. So it's very, very strong opener, and then we get through a few that are probably less interesting. Like the mid section on the album is the one perfunctory section. Fountain, this is, it's a gentle palate cleanser, but it's not massively necessary. Magic Wand's is got a bit more of a Leave Home vibe, a bit more of an urgency to it, but I don't know if there are too many songs on here that pull the same trick with a couple of lines of vocals, which I don't know if they could have changed that up by this stage. They do later on. Definitely track 8 though, Skipping Like a Stone, is roars the album back into focus like the first 4 tracks did. And it's got Beck on vocals, and it really reminded me of the quality of something like the Panda Bear track Step by Step last year with DJ Falcon and Alex Brax, which is, well, I think my second favourite song of the year on my radio show. It is fantastic. And it's also got it's got like a much fuller lyric, which again is actually much more positive than those pretty dark opening tracks lyrically. A bit more sort of, when you feel like nothing goes right, I'll be skipping like a stone. It's nearly on the way to optimism. But it also builds a lot more than the other tracks. It takes a good 2 minutes of 4.5 minute runtime to even kick in, and when it does kick in, it is very satisfying. It's undoubtedly the second best track on the whole album, and another one of the best ones I've heard this year. Beck works really, really well on that. And to carry on the vibe to The Darkness That You Fear as well, which is wise. It's like there's 2 halves to this album, one light, which happens after the Skipping Like a Stone track, and then there's the dark side, which is the half in the middle, or maybe it's thirds, because there's that less interesting mid-third section. And then they get up to a late album head of steam with Feels Like I'm Dreaming, one of the longest tracks on the album, and really quite a few, almost furious. And the track really is the one that would fit most on Surrender, and it particularly reminds me of the high point of Surrender, which was Bernard Sumner vocal Out of Control, and I really did feel a similarity between Feels Like I'm Dreaming and Out of Control, which is a great way to de facto end the album as the last track For That Beautiful Feeling, featuring Halo Maud again, who is on the opening track, is just a come down coda. It isn't like massively necessary, but it just serves as a coda after a pretty loud 7 minutes before it. So I think this is their best album. I think some of the albums in like 10 years ago, it felt like they were genre hopping. You know, they do a hit with the Salmon song. First thing I thought of was the Salmon song. The worst thing they've ever done. But it felt like they were genre hopping. Let's do a hip hop song with an old head hip hop guy. Let's do, and this feels more like an album. Even though there is a sort of weakness in that midsection, I've listened to it quite a few times now, and I think the first third and last third are the most cohesive and focused and urgent that they've been for me for a long time on an album. And even though Surrender is perfect and doesn't have that lull, the lull in the midsection isn't bad. It is just not quite the same strength as the opening and closing thirds. So I think this is a very strong album from the Chemical Brothers. For me, one of the best electronic albums of the year. Certainly some of the best individual tracks, Skipping Like a Stone, and Live Again is just monumental. But so is the fourth track as well, which is Goodbye. That's, you know, it's got several really amazing tracks on here. So 8.5 out of 10 for the Chemical Brothers' 10th album, For That Beautiful Feeling. I hope it's called that. For That Beautiful Feeling. Adios.